Chairman, thank you very much. In the week that Russia is murdering its neighbors and using fuel as a weapon, again, against all of Europe, intimidating everyone with it, we're discussing how much slower fuel will be managed in the United States. That's the problem, is that this continues to slow down. This conversation about certainty that's been here, my understanding from reading through this is FERC will now handle mitigation plans on a case-by-case basis. Case-by-case basis doesn't give anyone a sense of certainty to say, turn it in, we'll look at it, and we'll discuss it. And especially with a new process, when literally we should be trying to expedite things, it's now a case-by-case basis. Do a $3 billion proposal, and we'll take a look at it, case-by-case, depending on the makeup of this body. I would tell you, Keystone sent a pretty clear message day one of this administration. We don't want to do pipelines on oil. And then there was an announcement of a Federal Reserve nomination that the nominee announced immediately and made it very clear that they're going to use the Federal Reserve to then punish any entity that provides capital for any kind of fossil fuel projects. We've paused federal lands, paused for a year, permitting on federal lands and doing new leasing on that. So the pause for a year, and then this rule was announced, and it's an interim rule. Mr. Danley, how long does an interim rule last?
Senator, there's really no such thing as an interim rule. This rule isn't interim in that it applies immediately. And of course, the commission can always hear comments and listen to what people have to say, but nothing makes the commission as a body do anything about those later requests.
So let me just ask you a question, Commissioner Danley. Does FERC have the authority to regulate flaring natural gas at the production of the wellhead?
No.
Does FERC have the authority to regulate the combustion of that gas at the power plant?
No.
Does FERC have the authority to regulate my stovetop at my house?
No.
Or my water heater at my house?
No, it doesn't.
But this pipeline conversation, the transport device, is now going to have to say, for the pipeline company, show where you're mitigating all sources and your total environmental impact of greenhouse gases of actually moving this molecule.
That's correct. The idea is that the transportation service provider is requested to mitigate the emissions that occur upstream and downstream. They're encouraged, to use that word again, to give that mitigation plan.
So what it sounds like FERC is doing is to say, I don't have the authority to regulate those things, but I do have the authority to regulate you. And so I'm going to encourage you as an entity to go to them and put pressure and to make changes, because I can't do that, but I also don't have to give you a permit until you put pressure on somebody else.
It is, in my opinion, a classic case of doing indirectly what cannot be done directly.
It's what it reads like and it's what it feels like. Commissioner Christie, let me ask you a question here. And again, this goes back to our certainty conversation we're trying to be able to have on this, and how it's going to handle what a case-by-case mitigation proposal is going to be for any entity that already has approval by the commission now for their project. They already have approval, they're already done. They come back to request a minor change, let's say a timeline change, a date change in something. If they come back to be able to make a minor change on that, are they going to have to go through this process all over again? Those that are in process, that have started long ago, they've got to go through this. If they ask for a timeline change, they're going to have to do this.
It applies to all future and pending applications, and we actually have already approved facilities that are asking for route changes, minor route changes, and they're pending right now, and they're not being brought in front of us to vote on. My assumption is this whole policy is going to apply to those as well. So my answer to you would be, based on what I know, yes, it applies to everything. Even when you've been approved 5 years ago and you come back in for a route change, you're going to have to do this.
Chairman Glick, is that correct?
Thank you, Senator. So that actually isn't necessarily correct. It depends on.
Well, this would be helpful to everyone listening right now to be able to know, because everybody's trying to get certainty.
Right. No, I think this is all about certainty, as I said earlier. I think it depends on what's filed before the commission. But if it's a major significant request for a significant change, then yes, we're going to have to look at the environmental impacts. But you said earlier.
Hold on. Can I just clarify this, because everybody's listening? Who knows what significant and minor is in that sense? a date change, a timeline change, a route change, how significant of a route change is now significant. It has to go through this process all over again.
We are presented with that question every single day. We've been presenting with that, FERC has been presented with that question to the Federal Power Commission before that ever since 1938 as to what kind of change. We have amendments that come that are considered minor amendments, and we have amendments that come to the commission that are considered major amendments to the licenses. And the fact is that we look at these issues, we do these issues all the time, and we assess on a case-by-case basis, as you referenced, whether those issues are significant. Whether it be, the greenhouse gases is just one of many. All we got to do is look at our environmental impact statements or even our environmental assessments before we move forward with the projects. We look at every single case on a case-by-case basis and determine, by voting, the commissioners determine by a majority vote whether any particular item is significant. And even when we find those items are significant, we often, and often meaning like 99% of the time, still find the project is in the public interest. So this is not the death knell
But this is
project.
different. This is trying to be able to set a whole new set of standards for them. If there's a deadline change or a route change, that's still going to be a case-by-case decision of a vote of this 5 members of this body to be able to determine if they're going to have to go through this whole process all over again, even though they've already been approved for the project.
As has always been the case.
No, this is new, so that's what I'm trying to figure out.
No, what's new is that we're looking at one additional environmental impact, but we've always determined on a case-by-case basis whether that particular proposal, the amendment to the license, for instance, is significant enough that it requires additional environmental review or not.
Okay, I've gone past my time. Thank you.